What's up, everybody? This is Brian Davidson, and you are listening to the NIL Spotlight podcast brought to you by NIL Game Plan, your number one source for NIL news and, more importantly, education across all collegiate sports. Let's get after it. Today's guest is Darius Willis, former standout running back at Indiana University and now founder of ScoutSync, a platform focused on helping athletes, families, and coaches navigate the recruiting process more efficiently. Darius has lived the journey firsthand, from being recruited as an athlete to now building technology and systems to help the next generation gain exposure and make smarter decisions and better understand this evolving world of both recruiting and now NIL. Darius, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, I thought we'd start with a little bit of a rewind. Can you start to walk us through your recruiting story?
Man, I'd say it probably started in middle school, doing all the sports I did and having a lot of interest from multiple high schools. I would say the high school recruiting journey. But if we're talking about college specifically, my freshman year, actually my very first college visit was the University of Tennessee. I actually went the day that Peyton Manning, they retired his jersey, and my eyes were set and big on being in college sports. A recruiting journey I traveled so much. I had so many conversations with so many people that I never thought I'll be able to get to talk to, be able to see so many athletes. I think I had, at that time, in those days, it was a lot of mail. So I had piles and piles of letters and invitations from freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, just stacks of paperwork. But I would say it was not easy to make a decision. It was not easy going through all that, but there was a lot of fun of being able to be, especially the first athlete in my family or our first person in my family to go to college and have that opportunity.
And what advantage did that give you starting so early, literally in middle school, starting to go through the recruiting process and then going through it all over again to the college experience?
Yeah, I think I was able to see the competitive nature and see that I am sought after. I belong here. I am one of the best here in the area or in the country. And so it gave me a extra motivation and boost to be able to go out there and compete against anyone in high school. I didn't care who, or anybody in college. I didn't really care who, but to have that experience early through the recruiting, to be able to handle those travels, which were long in some cases. We drove a lot of places. So actually, I would say it prepared me for all the traveling that I would have to do in college.
And you told me a pretty funny and unique story about being in the very first Under Armour All-American Bowl. How was that experience?
Oh, man, that was awesome. So yes, we were the very first one that year, and that team was loaded. At that time, it was funny because I had already made my commitment, but I still had every college there trying to get me to decommit to go to their university. But it was a great blast. I think we were there maybe a week or so down in Orlando, and it was just a blessing opportunity to go compete with some of the best athletes in the country. I think we had Julio Jones on our squad, and you had AJ Green and Will Hill, and I think that first experience of just the fun of being around so many great people. We had a blast, especially because it was around bowl season. But then also, I think the competitive nature, because we were playing a lot of video games, getting to hang out. But it gave me a great perspective on one, that the D-line are fast. Because, man, at that All-American game, boy, were those D-line movement. And so it showed me the talent that I would be competing against at the college level.
Well, you've now experienced recruiting on both sides, both as a player, but now as a founder. What's the biggest thing that families misunderstand about the recruiting process today?
That it's a never-ending story. If you think you got it figured out, you don't. I think a lot of times families, you'll get told a lot of things from coaches, and you got to understand that coaches lie, and they're trying to get you to come to their school at whatever cost because their jobs are on the line too. And so a lot of the times there's not a lot of transparency from the coaching side and to your families, because they want to tell you what you want to hear, but not what you really need to know. And so I think that a lot of families get that misconstrued, and athletes are taken advantage of in that case, especially families that haven't been through the process, especially with mine. mine had never been through that process. And so if they're seeing that and going through that for the first time, you really need to have guidance around you of people who can help shape and mentor you on that process.
Speaking of that process and that part of that process, what problems that process did you try to solve when you started ScoutSync?
Yeah, for me in ScoutSync, it was definitely that connection, that exposure, the ability to seeing athletes have an opportunity. So even before the platform was created, we were showcasing in ways that athletes can have opportunities globally, not just here domestically in the US, but we were establishing our global footprint. But to be able to support athletes from Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, Asia, Africa of all parts, that was true definition to show that the pain is real globally and that we can help along this process. And so that was something that initially, as a former athlete, I wanted to make sure that athletes had that opportunity because not everybody does. There's so much talent out there, but there's not a lot of access to it.
Speak of taking advantage of the opportunity. Take advantage of it. You can't make mistakes along the way. What are the biggest mistakes you see athletes making when they're trying to get discovered?
Well, there's so many. I'll try to touch on a few. I can go on
Loaded
about
question.
that. Yeah, that's a big one. I think one of the things I see is that athletes are not proactive. I think it's great to have, you see a lot of recruiting services that, say they're going to place the athlete and their families pay for that, which is a lot of times a big mistake. But I think a lot of the athletes are not proactive enough. And so if you're paying for one of those recruiting services to do your work, you're not the one building that relationship with the coach. And that the coach you're going to be the one there, not that recruiting provider of these services or your family. And so they want to get to know you. So you have to be proactive in the day-to-day email context, building those relationships. It's okay to be told no. It's okay to be ignored because there's thousands and thousands of opportunities. And I think everyone sees like if I don't get an offer from Division 1, it's like, oh, then I don't want to go anywhere else. But there's great football at every level. And a lot of athletes think that they're not going to get exposed if they go to NAIA or go to JUCO for a year or two. That's not true. You're going to get discovered. If you got the talent, you do your work, your discipline, you're going to get discovered. But I'll say the biggest one is proactive.
We just talked about some recruiting services generally, but there's so many different platforms and services out there. What makes ScoutSync unique?
I think for us, it's definitely making it easier and transparent. Not only are we connecting the parent, the athlete, the coach, and now in today's world, we got to connect the agent, but we have combined an ecosystem to where everybody has a voice and everybody can connect within the same system. A lot of the times that of coach you won't have access to or that agent, we make that much easier.
Well, you just mentioned agents, so let's pivot slightly to NIL. How has the NIL conversation changed between athletes and schools at the high school level?
At the high school level, oh my goodness, it makes me want to rewind my clock to go back. But what I see now, especially as you got a lot of states who have adopted this NIL thing, so now that puts more pressure on the athletic department. That gives them and their coaches more work to do, and also now they have to be involved in some of those discussions around the agent because now the agent is there early. Youth used to be about development and focus, and now it's a pure business model for these athletes. So at the high school level, the agents are in these conversations early, more so than what I was used to back in the college at the professional ranks. And so now that the agents are there, it's important. What I see now is helping guidance on the financial literacy. And these agents are taking advantage at times because parents are not don't understand and athletes don't understand. So having the proper counsel is definitely important.
Today's episode is brought to you by NIL Game Plan and Athlete Guard. If you're a student athlete or a sports parent, NIL Game Plan is built for you, and protection is part of that game plan. Student athletes give everything they've got, from practices to tournaments, day in and day out. Athlete Guard gives NIL Game Plan families added injury protection and, more importantly, peace of mind when the unexpected happens. Included with your NIL Game Plan membership, Athlete Guard provides up to $10,000 per injury for eligible accident medical expenses, covering care following sports related injuries, including rehab and covered surgeries, with no accident medical deductible. Athlete Guard is underwritten by Mutual of Omaha Insurance Company and administered by Hub International. For more information and to see full coverage details, please visit nilgameplan.com today.
Well, you just hit on this on financial literacy, and a little bit earlier, you mentioned that you're the first person in your family to be lucky enough to go to college.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that dynamic a little bit? And that a lot of times the parent certainly doesn't have that financial literacy to help guide their student athlete, and they're forced to look for outside guidance.
Yes, that is definitely true, and I would say it's definitely higher, and I would say African American communities where they don't have a lot of the education, and so that is something that is super true. And I think that it's important now to have guardrails in place to make sure that these families are being educated early on if their athletes are looking to go to play collegiate at the collegiate level. And so, from my experience, we didn't have a lot of guidance. We didn't have a lot of structure. It was just go, 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 and travel and see what happens to make the best out of it. We were fortunate in our case to end up at IU where we were ground a great core, but I think that's not the case for everyone.
And just put your pundit hat on. Do you think NIL is creating more opportunity overall, or is it just creating more pressure and confusion for families?
I would say both. It's both in a way. It can be positive and negative, especially for looking at athletes or predominantly that's coming from lower income situations like myself that don't have access to a lot of things. And so for a lot of families, that's a meal ticket. For a lot of athletes who are hungry and driven, that's a meal ticket to be able to sign and get money to provide for your family, first and foremost. And I think that the athletes need to understand their value, and I think in ways that we can continue to help and support in that with how that evolves. But there are so many challenges that are still coming up because there's not a lot of regulation. I think there still needs to be regulation and structure around it, although we allow it.
Speaking of value and regulation, a big part of that is social media following. How do you think a high school athlete should approach social media and building a following base or trying to stay private and keeping their high school life and focused on what matters?
Yeah, I think it definitely has to depend on their focus. It's like when we building out our system, we looked at the different types of athletes. There's athletes that just want to play high school ball, and that's fine. They want to go on and get a job and a career, something other than sports. And there's a large athlete population that has the dream and the vision they can go play college sports, and maybe that might happen, it may not. And then there's some that might play internationally or play locally for a club, and we got the what is it, the Fisher's Freight or something like that, which is another channel for them. So I think the biggest thing is understanding the athletes that are in the different focus groups. And to that, the athletes that are focused on collegiate level, it is important to have these values. So on the social media side, I think that the athletes, it is important that they build a brand early. Definitely it is very key, but it also has to understand which athlete focused they are. If they're looking at collegiate and professional opportunities, it is important to build a brand. If they are not, then it's okay. They don't have to worry about the social media and the following and access.
Okay. Talking about different groups of athletes, there's a big part of athletes that are overlooked in the world, whether it be an international student and or maybe a non-revenue sport. How does ScoutSync help solve that problem?
So we are sport agnostic one. We're globally. There's not a place we can't go, and there's not a place we don't look to help. And so when we started this out in little old Switzerland, we had athletes from so many parts of Europe and different parts of Asia and Africa. And what we wanted to see right away is how we can support them meaningfully and create impact. And that's something that my mission, I'm driven on the impact side and how we can truly unlock these opportunities. There are so many companies or systems where you can go create a profile. What we're telling these athletes is not only is it just your profile, it's your resume, but we are developing you. We are giving you the access and the resources for you can go and create your own journey and path. no longer being hidden, no longer being gate locked by not having the money and things to support these initiatives. We are creating true impact globally for these athletes. And I think that's different than what others do.
Darius, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned in this journey building ScoutSync?
I think, oh man, being an entrepreneur is not easy.
I can relate.
For me, it's been great to see even my transition and growth from an athlete to a coach to a business person, and now in this phase of developing and trying to support so many around the world. Each stage along my process has allowed me to grow to another level each time, and I learn so much every day. But then seeing that I can impact so many people brings me so much joy, and that's why I love doing what I'm doing every day.
Okay, let's wrap with this. So, looking ahead in these next few years, let's say 2, 3, 4, 5 years, what do you think the future of recruiting in NIL starts to look like? How does that relationship change over time?
2 to 3 years from now, huh? I'm thinking, well, I'm hoping that we have more structure and guidance. I think we'll have to have more support, like I said, around the parents and the athletes learning. It's going to require more work from athletic departments to provide these resources, whether in the off season, before school, and summer school to start having these speaking arrangements so they can hear from whether certified agents or companies around the NIL space or things like that. I think having that good counseling and structure early on is critical. I think you will still see high values continue to rise because if colleges are going to find many revenue models within their own system to continue to adopt and pull money in for their athletes. So you will see a bigger push around women in sports and also a recalibration around the Title IX and thing. I think a lot of that still gets lost and not truly shared transparently. So I would definitely see more opportunities around women in sports. And a diversification globally, and definitely having more opportunities for international athletes to get the same piece of the pie that American athletes get for the NIL because they are just recruited and have to do the same work. So I think that will change as well.
Well, Darius, this has been amazing. Where can we send people to find out more about you and ScoutSync?
If you look forward to reach out to me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn or visit scoutsync.com to find any more information about us.
This is amazing. Thanks for coming on NIL Spotlight, brought to you by NIL Game Plan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the NIL Spotlight podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to visit nilgameplan.com to get started on your NIL journey for free. We'll see you next week.